to all the lovers of the strange, the Skywatchers of the night. Hello, citizens, and welcome to Unknown.
I'm Jason McClellan. I'm here with Maureen Ellsbury, Ryan Sprague, and Shane Hurd today for our monthly UFO Happy Hour. Thanks for hanging out with us. So guys, we're going to do what we try to do with these Happy Hour episodes, and that is just have fun and kind of talk about some of the things that have made news during this month. We're recording this in January, so we're going to be talking about things that have made news already early in this 2021 year. So to start, let's talk about what flooded the headlines right away, because at the end of the year, we had this massive COVID relief bill, is how it was billed to the public. Most of the reporting was about that because it contained things related to COVID relief. But it was really this just large omnibus spending bill for the end of the year. It had a bunch of stuff just crammed into it. And one of those things was that little piece that we'd been following for half the year, and that was about this request for a report from the government, from government agencies, about UFO-related information. And so we saw this flood of headlines already this year about how that 180-day countdown has started. It has begun. So within 180 days, we could have this report shedding all of the government's UFO secrets, right, Ryan?
Absolutely, man. I have no doubt this is the disclosure we've been waiting for decades. It's finally happening. God bless Stephen Bassett. I hope you can sense the sarcasm in there, but
just a little bit.
Yeah.
So it's just so funny. I don't know why we still get surprised by this, but it is funny every time we have any sort of news like this that just generates countless headlines by media outlets around the world. Something like this, where the majority of the headlines just completely misrepresent what is actually taking place. And we definitely saw that with this, just headline after headline talking about how the countdown has started. In 180 days, the government is going to reveal all of its secrets to the public. And that's obviously not true, first of all. Number one, it's silly to think they're revealing all of their secrets, because they're not going to reveal any secrets. That's not the point of this, and that is not how the government works. But number two, it's not in 180 days. It's within 180 days, and I think many of us suspect that that's going to be completed much sooner than 180 days from the start of that countdown. But then beyond that, they're not doing this out of the goodness of their hearts. They're not doing this as a show of good faith to just give the public everything it knows about UFOs. This is not a public benefit project. It's something for military purposes that is being conducted for the government to get a better understanding of their information sharing and the information each individual agency or department might have. It's not putting this stuff together in a pleasant report to give to the public. And that's what a lot of these headlines are indicating or suggesting or just outright saying is going to happen. And that's just not the case.
Yeah, and I think what you need to do is look at this. There's two good things about this. One is we're on the path forward to having a unified way to these military organizations, government organizations, a standardized way to report and unify reports on anomalous phenomenon. Great. That's a good start. Second, again, this is kind of the thing the media's been explaining, so to speak, as you mentioned, Jason, is this is an unclassified report. However, there is also an annex classified section. So again, we see when the government releases documents, and I know we'll get into this more in depth in our next point in this happy hour, is that even when you have these big public sort of unclassified reports, a lot of that is redacted information. So again, are we going to get to have this big disclosure event? No, don't get your hopes up. It's exciting that it was crammed into this massive multiple trillion dollar sort of relief bill that kind of just slid in there. Let's get this out of the way too. But honestly, yes, if it's a threat to our airspace, it's of course important that we get this on track. But I feel like we have a hell of a lot more to worry about within this first 180 days of our new administration. So I think everyone just needs to take a breath. Don't read too much into it, and let's hopefully have this be a step in the right direction, but it's not going to be that big event people are hoping for. It's the Y2K of UFO information.
Yeah, you make a really good point about just the timing of all of this. And yes, there are many other pressing issues right now that I think are going to take priority over these different agencies and organizations compiling their UFO information and sharing it with each other for this report. There are a lot of important things going on right now. And yes, UFOs are important, but people are dealing with the things we have here on Earth right now. And I think we're already seeing some of that stuff happen with, some personnel shifting happening, with people being assigned different roles. So already, before a lot of this stuff is even starting, we're having shifting and changing happening with an already very small, possibly just couple people involved with the UAP task force specifically. Granted, they're not the ones putting together this report, and they're not the only ones involved in it. But with already that kind of movement happening, it could mean things are a little slower or less forthcoming and as soon as we would like them to be. But to your point, you brought up the unclassified part, Maureen, and I mentioned on the previous episode just what that means. It's not just a flippant term they threw out there. Unclassified specifically means something, and it does not mean public. It doesn't mean that necessarily it's going to be available for the public. Granted, this stuff, down the road, of course, through FOIA requests, unclassified stuff can come out, but unclassified can't be released to the public unless it is authorized for that public release. Do I think that's going to happen? Yeah, probably. I think to some degree there will be a public release authorized on this unclassified report. But to just assume that's going to happen, or to present this whole thing in a way that this is for the public, it's going to be a public report, that's just assuming facts, not in evidence.
Yeah, all the fun stuff will be hidden.
Yeah, it will. It always is, Maureen. And I think, too, I know this isn't directly the UAP task force, but when we've seen that this task force doesn't even have a budget that we're aware of. Right. So I do wonder, even, besides the bill and the 180 days for findings, are we going to get anything from this UAP task force? Because right now it looks like they don't have any money to even do it. It's probably being allocated to other sections where this bill was slipped in. So I wonder, if we'll even get anything from the task force, let alone this Senate bill that was passed. And I mean, I think we just need to keep applying pressure. I think that's what it comes down to. People like John Greenwald going for those FOIA requests is the only way we're going to get anything.
Well, and I would like to hope that maybe this will, because we have been at this point and similar points in the road in the whole UFO process with the government many times before. And what I hope comes out of this is an accelerated sort of relearning what we've already learned and then moving to the next step. Because we have these periods that go by where the government, kind of scratches their head and goes, we got to figure out these UFOs. Then they finally talk to each other, they finally look into it, and they get this information that they've had all along. And, be going back and reinventing the wheel, but that's always what happens. Then they finally get back up to speed again, and then it kind of peters out and nothing happens. So I'm hoping that, there's enough momentum now that's generated by this that they will look through their boxes, they'll talk to the different groups, they'll put all their heads together, assess the current situation, and then move on to the next step without letting it die out and waste all their current efforts.
Yeah, I think this is
like,
just
Chris Mellon too.
Right.
Sorry to interrupt, Shane, but the efforts of the people who actually got this into the Senate Intelligence Committee and be like, yo, put some pressure on your agencies. Like, stuff's going on. The public wants to know. So, I mean, they did so much to get that in there. Let's not just drop the ball now. Like, I think the public really needs to kind of take the reins at this point, because we know the government's not going to. Like you said, they're going to make us wait it out until we forget about it.
Yeah, and I think this whole bill thing is really just a very much a baby step. And there's really two sides to it, because really they could have submitted a bill that had no public reporting element to it. They could have still got a report and briefed Congress and, various government agencies who had an interest, and not disclose anything. So there is two sides to it. But I found kind of interesting some of the text of the bill that talks about, the purpose of it and what their thinking is on it. And you kind of got to take them for their word on that, I think. We're focused on UFOs and have been. These are people who probably have zero knowledge, congressmen and so forth, that, this will be dipping their toe in the water. But I like kind of some quotes here there was a military.com article recently, and they said that lawmakers are concerned that there's no unified, comprehensive process within the federal government for collecting and analyzing intelligence on unidentified aerial phenomena, despite the potential threat, which is why this sweeping report on all relevant information regarding UAPs is essential. And they want information on UAPs that were found using, and this is what I thought was kind of interesting, geospatial intelligence, signals intelligence, human intelligence, measurement, and signature intelligence, regardless of which agency or service collected the data. Right there gives you some insight about how pervasive UFO data is within the government and has been picked up or noticed on varying intelligence capabilities. So they list some things here that I actually have not heard of. I was aware of the geospatial and the signals and the human, of course, but measurement and signature intelligence, I'm not even sure what that is. And so I think it's pretty fascinating, and we are seeing something new and unique to a slight degree, but I think it's just new because they're really trying to educate just a whole new group of lawmakers. But at the same time, they seem to be acquiescing to the pressure by the public to have more information on this. So I don't know, they're probably going to be walking a fine line. They'll produce a report. We'll see what we get out of it. I by no means feel it's disclosure of any sort, but it is a step in the right direction. So I think it's pretty fascinating, and I look forward to it. But, certainly my enthusiasm is quelled by the last 70 years of, the track record they have of obfuscating this whole subject.
I will say, though, it kind of feels like they can't put the cat back in the bag. That we've gotten to this point where the internet and technology and what's happening is you can no longer hide this subject, and that the government should or does have interest in it. There's no going back now. So while things might not move in a fast pace, I don't think they have the liberty to be as secretive as they have in the past in terms of research organizations within the government. I could be wrong, of course. I'm not saying that everything's going to be sunny going forward, or that these programs won't, like Ryan said, they have no financing. So it's basically, I was kind of laughing because it reminded me of Mulder and Scully in the basement. Kind of like, here, we're going to cram you in this small back room in the basement. Go look at your files without much budget. Yeah. Except for they do have that nice travel budget. But anyways, I can see a more positive route forward in terms of at least the government knowing that the public's not going to shut up anymore.
And to your point, Shane, about disclosure, I agree with you. I don't think this is any sort of disclosure. And I think, if anything, whether it's intentionally crafted this way or not, I think both based on the wording we've seen related to this report request and the detailed purpose behind it, it's just demonstrating and showing that the government doesn't really know anything about UFOs. That, again, whether that's intentional or not, that's the narrative that they want to create by doing this. They certainly could do that, and they're doing a good job of it. But on its face, what this demonstrates is that they don't really have a lot of information. They don't really understand the information. They need more information because they're sort of operating blindly. So that is basically them saying, hey, we don't know about these UFOs, but we're trying to figure that out. So whether or not that's true, we don't know, but they can certainly create that narrative going forward from this point.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was even thinking I don't know how the report will be constructed and so forth, but it's calling for a variety of governmental agencies to produce information on their UFO research, right? Well,
and not all
for
government
70 years,
agencies or agencies that you would think would be included. They're very specifically chosen. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. So that I'm very curious about that, because really for 70 years, we've all just been basically looking at the Air Force. And then only until a couple of years ago, the Navy has a program? Well, what other organizations are we going to find out that have programs, research and study programs on UFOs? That in itself would be huge. Getting a grasp or an understanding of that, something that's been hidden from us for all this time. So, I mean, I'm sure there's going to be some information to glean from that report. They're not probably going to say, oh, yeah, Roswell's real and it happened just like everyone thinks. But we're going to get a lot of information that, will help connect other dots, I guess is what I'm saying, throughout, UFO research, hopefully.
Yeah. No, I'm optimistic.
Jason,
I think some good stuff will come out. Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to add one thing on what you said of they don't know. I spoke to Luis Elizondo like a week ago, and I asked him, I'm like, do you know who these people are on the UAP task force? And he was like, yeah, of course I do. And I'm like, all right, is there anything you can share? And he's like, no, I mean, I'm not at liberty to discuss who it is. He's like, just know that they know who you all are. And I think he meant, the UFO community, these people that are doing research and putting things out there. So I think that's kind of a sign that they are looking to us for information, whether they are making that visible to us or not. He did say, oh yeah, I mean, some of these Twitter handles that just pop out of nowhere, I guarantee you it's them looking at the work all of you are doing. So I don't know if that was meant to make us all paranoid or what, but it does make me think, maybe they are starting from scratch and they're going to the only people they know will have information, and that's people who've been looking at it for 70 plus years. So it gives me some hope that we still have a place in all of this, when kind of the whole UFO narrative gets gobbled up by the Navy or the Defense Department. They're looking at what we are doing in the public as well, because ultimately they do have to answer to us some way, somehow.
You say that like you think they really care.
That's a good point. I don't think they
no
do.
reason to tell you anything, and they don't care if you're annoyed or pissed off at it at all. So
that's so true.
Let's move on to our next topic, something else that has made similar headlines, a lot of headlines, man. So many media outlets around the world have covered this. And this sort of ties into the UFO report request, and that is CIA UFO files. And there have been so many headlines lately saying that the CIA, ahead of the deadline of 180 days, has decided to release all of its UFO files. Tying this in, saying that the CIA, the recent news you've seen about CIA UFO files is anyway related to this UAP or UFO report. And that is not the case. It has nothing to do with it. The CIA didn't recently release their UFO files. CIA didn't do anything. What did happen was researcher John Greenwald took a CD-ROM that he had acquired from the CIA and went through the painstaking process of taking each of those individual files and nearly 3,000 pages worth of UFO files that were in random formats like TIFF image formats and stuff, converted them to PDF and made them searchable. So what John did was take all these CIA files that had already been declassified, already been out for many years in cases, some of them since the 90s, but he went through the process of making them so they're easy to go through, easy to search, presented them in a more user-friendly format. So huge thanks to John for that. No small task, but almost all of the reporting about this has been completely wrong.
Yeah. I think John even mentioned in some of the interviews he did after this, they make it incredibly difficult to search. So I think it's amazing because you guys know as researchers, we're looking for the most expedited way to find information. That doesn't mean Google search done, my research is over, but if you're looking for a certain thing from the DoD, type in DoD, and now John's made it accessible. All files within the DoD will be right here. So I think that's awesome. But like you said, Jason, how many people came to you guys the day after all these headlines and were like, "Oh my God, the CIA released everything"? It's we've been reading these files for 10 years now.
Right. Again, and John does, always talk about the fact that the CIA and they know what they're doing. They're trying to bury researchers in a ton of documents, and hopefully, they'll get bored and give up or get frustrated. And another problem with a lot of these documents is I know John mentioned in an interview that the old typewriter fonts make it really difficult sometimes to read the lettering. So if you search UFO on Black Vault, you're going to get a ton of documents that aren't actually UFO related. But, again, like Ryan mentioned, a lot of these people who are not familiar with UFO subject in depth have reached out and asked how big of a sort of, is this a smoking gun or what have you? And no. And a lot of these documents are so heavily redacted that there's nothing of note there except for, maybe seeing hints of evidence that there was physical evidence of some kind that the government was looking at, and that the government was interested in UFOs after they said they weren't, after Project Blue Book, and a handful of other things. But you're not going to find sort of information, the CIA admitting that UFOs are extraterrestrial in nature. That, you're probably not going to find. You'd have to do a hell of a lot of digging in these, and wordplay, I would say.
Yes. The thing with these files, I always roll my eyes when I see new things come out about the CIA UFO files or the FBI UFO files, because anytime there's any sort of movement or activity or anything related to these, there's always tons of headlines making it out to be this new thing that the FBI, wow, they had an interest in UFOs. They have UFO files. This is earth-shattering news. First time we're hearing about this. But that's not the case. We've heard about it so many times before. And both the CIA and the FBI love to play on this. You know, they've really milked these files for everything they can get. We certainly saw it with the X-Files revivals. You know, they would love to, you know, be cheeky with it on Twitter and post, "Hey, why don't you check out our real UFO files?" And you know, they've had them on their website. The FBI's got its you know, the reading room and these places where, you know, the UFO files are some of their most popular searched files in their databases. They've had this stuff available. Is it all they have? No, certainly not. And John points that out too with the CIA. Right. They've got their UFO files right on their website. You can go and search there. It's not very user friendly, and he points out that, you know, what they have on their website is not all of their files. Allegedly, all of their files are what was on the CD-ROM that he has since put on the Black Vault. But even that, you know, there's no way of knowing if that's all their files. But according to the CIA, it is all of their UFO files. So we don't know. But the point is, they've been out there available for the public for quite a long time. It's not something new, and it has nothing to do with the report currently being requested by the Senate.
One of the files was actually kind of interesting that John came across that I hadn't heard of. So, I mean, there was some cool stuff to come out of it. At least we got some new stuff to look at. I mean, he found a file from the Assistant Deputy Director for Science and Technology, who was shown something about UFOs, and he decided he would personally look into it. And after he gave advice on how to move forward with these UFO files he was given, and that advice, of course, in the file is completely redacted. It looks like Stanton Friedman's worst nightmare. Everything's blacked out in it, but cool nonetheless. I found a file, dug really deep for this one, and it came from 1954, and it was about a shortage of Coca-Cola bottles. And this was, yep, this came from the CIA. So yeah, you're gonna type in UFO and get some weird stuff, not just about UFOs. There was a shortage of Coca-Cola bottles in 1954, August 4th, in case anyone was wondering.
You never know what you're going to find, but yeah, I love the Coca-Cola. No, these things are always so fascinating. File. Yeah, there's great reading to be done in there, but I agree. I mean, we rarely find, you know, anything that's super exciting in these mountain dumps of files, but they're interesting reading, and interesting to see what the CIA, what the FBI, what these different agencies deem worthy of keeping in their files. Like, some of it's just completely random. You have no idea why they were involved in the first place. But let's move on to our next story. And this one, you know, I'm excited about for a few different reasons. But the main reason is I am and have always been a big Robert Bigelow fan. And you probably saw the past week a lot of headlines about Robert Bigelow. And Robert Bigelow is a multi-millionaire. He's not quite a billionaire. That's a common mistake. He's not a billionaire, but almost a billionaire. And he's probably not a billionaire because he spent so much of his personal fortune on space and on investigating UFOs and other paranormal topics. And, you know, he is the head of Bigelow Aerospace, which is kind of at a standstill right now. But, you know, before Bigelow Aerospace, he made his fortune in real estate in Las Vegas with Budget Suites of America. And the whole point of him acquiring wealth was because he wanted to do this research of his personal interests. He wanted to do projects to take people into space, and that's what he's spending his money doing. So we're all pretty familiar with, you know, his UFO history and how he's kind of been involved in seemingly every aspect of the UFO phenomenon. And has sort of had his hand in every case, it seems, which is really interesting. But he's making news recently because he's not dipping his toe in the water of this particular topic. He's returning to the topic of sort of consciousness and looking at, you know, can we survive death? Does consciousness survive death? And so if you haven't read it, I highly encourage you to check out the New York Times article that Ralph Blumenthal wrote on January 21st. It is an awesome deep dive article into Robert Bigelow, kind of his history, how he got into all these weird subjects, all the things he's been, not all the things, but a lot of the things he's been a part of, how he's personally financed a lot of paranormal investigations, and how currently he's offering nearly $1 million if you can help him figure out how to survive death.
And I hope people aren't going out and actually, experimenting, like trying to figure out how to survive death. I could see that leading to very disastrous situations.
Yeah.
One thing I find interesting too, and we know that Bigelow's always had kind of this spiritual consciousness sort of background in terms of life after death, and his wife, he mentions in his interview with George, had paranormal experiences with apparitions and things like that. But I find it interesting, the timing where Netflix just released, Leslie Kane's, the series based off of her book, Surviving Death. And now there's this Netflix series, which I have to be honest, I haven't seen it yet. But it's all about, experiences when people had near-death experiences. So it's very interesting that this has popped up within the same month that show was released as well. So it's always
all connected.
Yeah, it's interesting that this is going to be a new fascinating realm for people, I think, and people are going to get interested in the subject via binging Netflix at home during a pandemic and all these other aspects. So
Leslie is tied into this. She's one of the judges for this contest that he's hosting.
The essay contest.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
But
Leslie's involved
I think
with
she's
that.
also she's also a member, right, on the new board of his
I believe.
Yes,
I believe
she is.
So. And
She
this is
is.
something
Yeah, so
again
there
that
you
he's
go.
been involved in, decades ago, and he was involved in the research of Bud Hopkins. So a lot of these tie-ins, these are relationships and research that has been sort of ongoing and working together for decades.
Yeah, I mean, I think Maureen's right too. Like, everyone's kind of looking at their mortality right now, I think, in the middle of a pandemic. And I know for a fact, the Netflix series had been in the works for a while, but they weren't sure when it was going to come out. So I'm sure, again, it's like with the show Unidentified and then the A-Tip stories coming out. It's all connected. All these people, they work together to find the right times to release these things.
Right.
That's marketing, and that's what you do. So I completely understand that side of it. Maureen, you brought up another good point, is Bigelow's wife, and I think she passed away this past year, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So you have to wonder how much of that was an impetus for Bigelow to revisit this. It's kind of morbid and almost romantic in a way to think maybe, this is why he's getting back into the afterlife game, because he just lost the love of his life. So I don't know.
And he's had to deal with death a lot. He certainly had a son who committed suicide, and then a grandson who committed suicide. So, I get it. There's a lot of personal reasons there. I saw a lot of people, or not a lot of people, but some people giving him shit, for wanting to explore this topic, thinking he's just some rich guy who's so arrogant, he wants to live forever. And that's not the case. I mean, I can't speak for Robert Bigelow, and certainly I know people who have worked for Robert Bigelow and don't have the most glowing review of the man. But when it comes to this topic, I don't see him as being this sort of ego-driven, wealthy individual who wants to live forever because he's so great. Not at all. I think it has to do with these personal, family issues and wanting to know if there's more, what comes next, where are my loved ones, and can I possibly reach them?
Yeah. And a lot of his early research had to do with consciousness too.
Yeah.
Right? With NIDS and everything. So,
Yep.
I mean, why not use what you maybe learned from that and explore other avenues, especially if it's UFOs and consciousness, Maybe there's a connection.
Yeah. It's like all of those, or consciousness has been, kind of in the public view for a while in both the fields of UFOs, standalone or NDEs, and then even Skinwalker Ranch. And so to me, it's just kind of a natural progression, right? Paranormal, UFOs, near-death experiences, all of those things. There is some, you get a sense that there's some kind of connectivity to them. And I know that, people are thinking that that's consciousness. So, to me, it's kind of the natural progression where things are going, in multiple fields. And it's a big topic of study. And even if you even consider maybe even quantum physics and mechanics and stuff, there's some weirdness there in relationship that is going down that consciousness path. So I think it's really kind of a new expanding kind of discipline.
Yep, yeah. Absolutely. I think it's very much linked to, he discusses his time on Skinwalker Ranch and ultimately why he sold the ranch. And I believe he used the phrase that he got bored and tired of not having the right answers, sort of appear to him. And I think that is also why he tends to, on these big questions. And Jason and I for sure 100% know that sometimes people try to, I'm thinking of our Philadelphia UFO event weekend where a bunch of UFO researchers were privately flown out to this whole weekend extravaganza. And we were asked to fill out essay questions on what we believed all these answers to some very important UFO and Earth questions are, and sort of trying to get the answers from a hive, sort of an intelligence hive, and offering large sums of money or sort of other perks to try to get people to reveal what they know. And if you have a ton of money and you're someone who, I can't wait around for 20 years to find the answer to this question, so I'm going to make this really appealing to the public. I'm going to offer nearly $1 million if people can give me the answers I'm seeking. And if not, then I'm maybe going to get sidetracked and go into a different field of study, see if I can answer that sort of portion.
No, I love rich people who do this, right? We talk about rich people like Elon Musk all the time, who, got to applaud these rich people who take their money and use it to try to answer deep questions or to better humanity or things like that, rather than just buying another yacht. So I love that Robert Bigelow spends his money. He certainly has spent an absolute fortune on these paranormal topics. And although I find this consciousness stuff interesting, it's Bigelow's lifelong, decades-long journey into the paranormal, into UFOs, all of this stuff that I would just die being able to have a conversation, open off-the-record conversation with him about all of this stuff, the things that he's learned, the things that he's been involved in. And I hope, and I don't think this is in his wheelhouse or even something he's thinking about, but I would love to read a Robert Bigelow book about his journey through the exploration of the weird, because I think he's got a story like nobody else. I don't think a lot of people realize just how involved he has been in UFOs for so many decades. I mean, he was actively involved with Stanton Friedman in the early Roswell research. He's had his hand probably in most of the cases that people know about. He certainly did a big part of the investigation into the Colares incident in 79 or whenever that was. He's had his hand in a little bit of everything that we're familiar with in the UFO community. And, some might step back and get conspiratorial and wonder why that is. But on the other hand, he's a guy who's got the means and the interest. This is his passion. This is his interest. And he has been able to insert himself and be involved and try to find answers for so many years. I would just love to read a book sort of walking through this crazy life that he's had exploring the strange.
I think it'd be really interesting to have a chapter. I know he touches on this a little bit in the interview, but we've also met and spoken with a lot of people on our Skinwalker Debrief podcast. And a lot of the information that Bigelow mentions, the hitchhiker phenomenon, and that things around people he knew started happening after leaving Skinwalker Ranch, anomalous phenomenon, and a lot of people, researchers that were there. And he said he was more scared for sort of the fear people had after leaving and the experiences that they were having. And I can tell you that a lot of the stories regarding the hitchhiker phenomenon from Skinwalker Ranch, people didn't want to talk about live on the air. So we had a lot of that information shared off the recording. But it's very interesting. People are very private about these hitchhiker experiences they've had post Skinwalker Ranch. Right. And it's happened to so many people that I think it'd be really interesting to dive into that further. And I think that, I mean, that's probably linked in the whole consciousness thing as well. It's kind of crazy. Mm-hmm. What comes around goes around in a weird circle.
I have to applaud George Knapp on these interviews. It was clear that Bigelow probably approved these because it was going to promote his new study and organization and everything, because it kept tying back to that. But at the same time, I think George did a good job of really trying to cover everything up until then, and getting some stuff. And the Skinwalker mini interview was, I think, the most interesting to me, to be honest. Like the hitchhiker phenomenon, Maureen, you mentioned. And also that, like, Skinwalker Ranch was just a tiny portion of the phenomenon. I mean, that kind of blew my mind. He was saying, like, oh, no, every ranch in that basin and everything was experiencing stuff. Yeah. And local law enforcement and this. So, like, this one Skinwalker Ranch is only a small portion of it. And you don't really hear about that often when it comes to it, because we want to put it all on Skinwalker Ranch because it's such a soundbite. But there's
a lot of conflicting reports. Really cool. Yeah, there's conflicting reports about that, and some people say that a lot of the neighbors, and who knows if they're then just trying to be more private, but there's people that say, no, we've never seen anything strange around this area, and then you have the reports that say, like, no, there's a ton of activity happening, and everyone's seen stuff. So it's kind of hard to know which is which. And yeah, I think that area in general, it's not like it's a fenced off piece of property only that is having this experience. It has to be regional in that area. So, but yeah, who knows? I think there's a lot of mystery still behind it, even though there's been a lot of exploration into it as well. Yeah.
You mentioned Skinwalker Ranch, the show, and the second season of that is coming soon, but I suspect there are going to be quite a lot of UFO TV programs this year. There always are, but I think this year is going to also be another UFO heavy year in terms of programming. And, this growth of every production company, every network wanting to have their own digital network, it just won't stop. So, we're getting new ones, it seems like every week. And Discovery Plus is one that just recently rolled out. And we've got a new show on Discovery Plus called UFO Witness. And that's with Ben Hansen and former Project Blue Book investigator Jenny Ziedman. And this show, I mean, although it just started this month, it's already halfway over. I think four episodes have already aired, but at the digital platform. So, that kind of means different things. But have any of you guys checked out UFO Witness yet?
Yeah, I mean, I know Shane and I have seen a few of the screeners and whatnot. I've seen the first 6 episodes so far, and it's interesting. Like you mentioned with Jenny Ziedman, it's so cool to see a former Blue Book investigator still alive, talking about like these files that haven't really seen the light of day in decades. So I think it's really cool they got Ben to do the show. He's the perfect person for a show like this, to dig into old files and see how they can connect to modern day UFO cases and phenomenon. And they also got Mark O'Connell, the guy who wrote the the biography on J. Allen Hynek. I mean, who knows Hynek and those files better than Mark? So it's pretty cool to see Ben kind of go to these two experts, and get the lay of the land and then go investigate it himself. So yeah, I mean, the show is interesting. I'm going to be talking to Ben next week about it, actually, but we are the biggest critics when these shows come out, and I will say there's some questionable stuff and people in the show, Richard Doty being one of them, Lauren Eisenhower being another one, two very controversial people in the UFO field. So to see them in the show kind of gave me some pause. So I'm interested to talk to Ben about that and what he thinks about some of these areas they explored in the show. But it's cool. It's a UFO show. That's really all I can say. It's a show about UFOs.
Yep.
What do you think?
No, I agree. It was fine. Yeah, it was good, and I thought that was really great to have Jenny Ziedman in that, and just that connection to Blue Book, and actually her perspective, and you could tell her attitude about these cases and some of the information in there, and it wasn't what I expected from a Blue Book investigator. She was fairly pro on these cases that they had selected, so I thought that was kind of interesting, and of course having Mark there as well, and even some of the other stuff that they showed, there are just some little different looks at the cases that, just from a slightly different perspective. I thought that was different, but I don't want to spoil it for people. But I mean, it's worth the watch, and I'm very supportive of Ben, and he does a great job. And it has that kind of what looks like a popular format now for these UFO shows, where you have an investigator that, goes from I don't know, from their bunker, their office type thing, and then they go out, to different locations and different people and talk to them. And I mean, it's good. It's, it's visually good. But yeah, there were, I think you guys know how big a fan I am of Richard Doty. So that's kind of a bummer. But at any rate, I know, there's production companies that have a say so and others. So yeah, you can't completely control that whole thing. But yeah, I recommend it. It's worth watching. And like you said, Jason, man, there's just going to be a whole spate of new UFO shows coming on. And I'm always of the mind that, look, I don't care. A UFO show is a good thing because it still advertises it, gets it in the public consciousness. And like with anything, you have to wade through some of the BS, but there's still some gems in there and good information. So I think there's
another new show on history called The Proof Is Out There. And I've only caught, I think I only cut a couple episodes of that so far, but I like that show. I
love it.
I don't know why.
Who's the lead in that again?
I don't remember
Tony
his
Harris.
name.
He's a
journalist.
Oh yeah. He's a journalist.
He's great.
He's not a UFO guy at all, as far as I can tell. Which is kind of a cool aspect to it, because you get this perspective of, fairly objective.
Yeah,
I'm so happy
I've
you bring that
enjoyed
one
it.
up, Jason. Yeah, it's
I've
really
enjoyed
good.
it. And
They've debunked so much, which I think is unlike most of these shows. They're willing to go there and be like, "Nah, that's fake," and they have some really good people on there. Kudos. To them.
they've got Mark on there, and I'm so happy about that. Mark D'Antonio from MUFON, the chief photo and video guy from MUFON. By the way, Shane, aren't you number 2 next to Mark in that department?
Oh no! I'm just one of many, but I've worked with Mark, and and he is awesome, and he's got a new telescope he's setting up here in Arizona, and so that's been fun, but yeah. Good stuff.
I do like that show. I like shows. I like shows like that because we, and you and me especially, Maureen, we spent years and years and years at our full-time job analyzing photo and video, and so this type of show where they show a photo or show a video, they show footage of something paranormal, and then try to analyze it and determine if it's legit or has signs of a hoax or whatever. that's just something that we did as part of our regular job. So when I watch these videos, it's super fun to me. I love that process, going through and like trying to analyze something, trying to come up with logical explanations, looking at the problems with it, like in how the people recording the videos are acting, what's going on in the scene. And they go through some of that on the show, and it's so fun to see. And with a show like this, I spend more time talking to the TV than I do with most shows, because I'm shouting out my answer and yelling at them to say something else. Why aren't you looking at this aspect of it? And then Mark comes in and brings up the points that I was yelling at the TV. But it's a fun process to go through, and I think they do a pretty good job.
Damn it. This is my problem here, guys. Do you know how much money I'm spending on streaming services already? And it's a lot. And then, now we have Discovery Plus and all these networks that keep launching their own. And maybe it's only $6 or $7 a month. But add that on to like 12 other $15 a month subscriptions. Like I might as well have like paying satellite prices.
Yeah, exactly. With a lot of these shows, even though I really want to see them, I don't sign up at the beginning to see them. I wait till all the episodes are out so I can sign up for the free trial and then binge it.
Yeah. I already signed up for the free trial on Discovery Plus, and then I forgot to watch anything on it. So I kind of blew it.
I've wasted a few of those too. Yeah. So another history show.
Well, that's the other thing.
Just guys caught this. Yeah, exactly. That's right, Shane. I don't know if you guys caught this. This isn't really that new anymore, but the Lawrence Fishburne hosted show on History called History's Greatest Mysteries, they did that 3-part Roswell special. And, I saw, a fair amount of kind of poo-pooing this show because, that's the hip thing to do with anything Roswell. Who cares about Roswell? Roswell's old, been there, done that. Let's move on. Why are we talking about Roswell? However, I gave this show a chance, and it was really cool because it focused specifically on the Marcel family. And, this introduction of a diary, a journal of sorts that Jesse Marcel Sr. kept with his important possessions and passed on to his family. And that's just a small part of what this special does, this 3-part special. It really does a great job going through and tracking down and speaking to other members of the extended Marcel family and other members of the extended family of people who Jesse Marcel worked closely with and could potentially be the author of this journal that was in his possession. But it goes through a lot of interesting angles that haven't been gone down before with the Roswell case. And just getting to see those in-person conversations with these family members, it's really fascinating, especially if you're familiar at all with the Marcel story and how crucial of a part that plays in the whole Roswell story. It's really cool. I thought they did a really good job with it.
Yeah, I thought some of the science they applied to it was awesome.
Yes, exactly.
Like they had they had the handwriting analyst, they had the cipher decoder. They really just brought in really interesting stuff. Again, I think the lead in it is a investigative journalist, and it just had all these different people you've not seen before and processes you haven't really seen much of in all of these programs. So I thought that was really fascinating too.
Yeah, he was a former CIA guy.
Sorry, Ryan.
It was by far the most comprehensive, I think, overview of Roswell to date. And yeah, I interviewed Ben a couple weeks before the show came out, and I didn't know what to make of the guy, like former CIA op and everything. Like, what's your agenda with all this? But once he came on with Denise Marcel and really dug into the case, like I was really impressed. Again, like I've been there, done that. Like Roswell's been done to death, and there's like I try to not look at Roswell as much as possible, but this 3-part series was I would argue it is probably the best overview of Roswell that's been made probably like to date. So maybe I'm saying a lot, but I highly recommend that 3-parter. They're like an hour long each or something, too.
What is the name of this show?
Yeah.
I haven't seen it.
It's called History's Greatest Mysteries is the name of the show. History's Greatest Mysteries, hosted by Lawrence Fishburne. It's on History. And it's like episode 5, 6, and 7, I want to say. I'm not sure.
Yeah, something like that. Mm-hmm.
Damn, I got a lot of stuff to catch up on.
And those are long. Yeah,
It's hard to keep up with it.
I think they're an hour and a half each or something like that. It is quite a little mini series there. But they do a really good job. They do a lot of data. And speaking about like government agencies and sharing UFO data, I wish some of these TV shows would do that. And that's never going to happen. I mean, this is all proprietary. They want that stuff locked down so they can make money off of it. But talking about this specific show, I mean, think about all the data gathering they did, the ground penetrating radar, all of that shit they did to like map the debris field and, you know, determine, you know, hard and soft areas and where things were returning from the surface to determine if something was buried there. You know, they mentioned that possibly something neoprene was buried in a spot. Go out and dig that shit up. I mean, there's just so much there with the information that they gathered and probably spent a lot of money gathering it. It would be great. And I know other shows have done similar things and, you know, doing these aerial surveys and just all of this comparative data, being able to share that would be amazing for subsequent investigations to go out, build on that data and take it further.
I think as long as it's like they're, you know, the production company is finding and using unbiased, credible labs and services for these surveys. And like, you know, a lot of times we know production companies take short corners on that stuff. So it may be they're showing the data that looks really interesting, but they're pushing an aspect of it that is not as big as they're making it out to seem. And we know that happens a lot, and especially with doing the sort of, as they say, boots on the ground investigation of different sites. And so, yeah, that'd be great if they would present it, but I can tell you there's probably reasons they don't want to, and it's because of those short corners.
Yep, and you got to make it look good for TV. But I wish, you know, for research sake, they could present that stuff on the show, especially with testing of like metal and things like that. Say what testing specifically was done or what limitations they had when trying to do that and what other things would be needed to get any more data out of that specific sample. You know, Maureen, you'll enjoy this. They do go visit Chuck Wade in this miniseries, and Chuck pulls out his, you know, big collection of interesting looking materials, and he lets Ben take some samples, and they say that they tested them, but, you know, couldn't really determine anything. That's nice, but I want more information. Right, when they say things like that, they just like brush over that. Or what testing was done? What specifically was determined with the test you did? But that's just kind of like brushed to the side as a big nothing. But I did learn something, and I'm embarrassed to say this because it means I didn't pay attention to the
Chuck?
100 or 200 times Chuck was in our offices all those years ago. But his family is actually the ones who owned the bar, Wade's Bar in Corona, where Mac Brazel brought the material first on July 4th when he was showing it off to people and trying to get their take on what to do with it. So Wade's Bar, it was his dad's bar. I didn't know that.
That's awesome. So for people listening, Chuck Wade lives in Corona, New Mexico, and has a whole collection of different materials he has acquired from the crash site at Corona. And he brings them with him everywhere. You know, we've met him many times over the years, both coming into our office to show us these materials, as well as at the International UFO Congress that we ran for, upwards of almost 8-9 years or something.
Something like that.
And so we've seen all these materials many times. When you're in an environment like that, being approached with those kind of materials, sometimes you're not capable of analyzing on the spot and or sort of understanding if they're important or not when you have people presenting them very frenetically sometimes. So it's interesting. I'm glad that a show has gone out, and Ben was able to talk with Chuck. I know Ben's met him many times at the Congress as well. So I haven't heard that name in a long time.
I hadn't either. I hadn't seen anything about Chuck for the longest time, but there he was on the show, and I was all, I wonder if they're going to do something with Chuck's medals, and they did. So, but it didn't materialize.
Jason,
so yeah.
To add on to that whole aspect of like production companies and like what they have in their possession that UFO researchers would kill for. I mean, like I wrestled for almost a year in getting all of the data from the materials I had tested of Frank Kimbler's, which is amazing. Yeah. And thank God Frank had more of these materials to get tested afterwards, because I fought for like a year to get all of the results. But on a separate note, I recently spoke to the guy who produced the Unidentified show, and he said specifically, like, hundreds of military witnesses came to them with stories for Unidentified, and they could only put on like 2 or 3 people every episode. So my obvious question is, well, what about all those reports, like, of military witnesses seeing UFOs? Where did those go? And he's like, that's a really good question. I'm like, you have no idea how much we would kill for all of those. So
the unfortunate reality, I think, is that with these, I mean, certainly on a production company level, when they do anything, pretty sure they sign the rights over absolutely everything to the network, whatever network is attached. But the network, we had the same problem with the government too, and UFO Files. But even more dramatically so, where network executives change like all the time, like more frequently than I change my sheets, and I change my sheets all the time. But their turnover is huge. You have people with different priorities, different feelings on different projects, but they also, I don't think, are set up to be this warehouse for just terabytes and terabytes of footage for each show that they buy and then don't use. Right? I think they have limited resources. So when a show's done, a lot of that's probably getting dumped, which is a tremendous shame, because like you said, with that, when you have interviews, when you have science that's done, this research where you hire these companies to come out and do ground penetrating radar and create all sorts of maps and things of terrain, I'm guessing, unfortunately, a lot of this stuff is just getting deleted when the project is done.
It's in
That'd be terrible.
It's in the Gmail inboxes of casting producers. So you'll notice
she's right.
that
She's right.
I am.
Yeah.
So you'll notice anybody that's ever been contacted by a potential TV show, the email you're going to get is from a personal email, usually. Sometimes the production company's legit email, because so many of these people that are doing the casting and the research for these shows, story producers, are contract workers. Yep. So generally they'll reach out on their personal emails unless they are a full-time employee of the production company. And they're asking for material to be sent to their personal emails unless there's like a form or something. So a lot of these conversations are in freelancers' personal Gmail accounts, or God forbid somebody had a Hotmail address. I don't think I'd answer it.
I still have one, but But well, to play off of that, Maureen, to kind of wrap that part up, I got in touch with the casting person, and I'm gonna have a meeting with them about the protocol, like what happens to this. These are military witness reports that we would kill to have in the UFO field. So hopefully something will come of it. But like you said, my biggest fear is that it's just delete, and we'll never hear about it again. So I'll keep you guys posted, but maybe we'll have some new military cases to look at in the near future.
I feel like those are going to be sat on, those particular cases are going to be sat on because they're going to think we could use these in the future. This is a very hot topic right now.
It is,
Well,
and that was my biggest fear. Yeah,
and we'll have to see what happens with history going forward, right? Because I think right now their hyper focus on UFOs, is kind of questionable with the recent passing of Kevin Burns. He was their driving force behind all the UFO content. He's no longer there, so. We'll have to wait and see what happens. But as of right now, history is still putting out UFO content, and they like to repurpose their content like every network likes to. So, some of that stuff that was created for unidentified, gets repurposed and used on Ancient Aliens. Just kind of go back and forth, and they have that very incestuous relationship with all the products that they own. They will just repurpose material and use that. I can't tell you
Jason,
how many different shows I've been on.
You've been on unknown shows.
Yeah. They just repackage it in a different way and use it on a different show. So at least that means they still have the content, right? And I'm hoping that other networks do too, because it's so much content, and they've spent the money to acquire it. Whether it's testimony, whether it's speaking to an expert about something to get their thoughts on a particular issue, or whether it's witness testimony or photos or videos or scientific testing of something. That's all stuff they spent time and money to create. That all has value for us as researchers, and I just cry thinking that a lot of that stuff over the years just gets dumped. Well, on a more fun topic, going fictional, there are certainly going to be lots of alien-related shows this year, as there always are. And one of those is on Sci-Fi called Resident Alien, about an alien who crashes to Earth and hides out in a remote Colorado mountain town. Have any of you guys checked this show out?
No, I didn't even know it was out yet. I know Alejandro Rojas just interviewed the cast, I think, over at Den of Geeks. So that should be
they were doing
I think it's
like they did for your CW show. They get into like doing like UFO trivia and stuff like that. So I think they were doing that. Some interesting stuff like that, which I love. I love when they do the marketing pushes and bring UFO lore and things like that into it, because it all goes along that public education route. People have this casual interest and they're looking at it from this fictional standpoint, this fun standpoint, but they're using real information and kind of introducing the general public to that.
When we did our education press tour for that Roswell, New Mexico show on the CW, I showed up and I said something like, okay, so back in 1947, and I can't tell you how many TV executives came up to me and were like, whoa, it happened in 1947. I'm like, you just made a show called Roswell, New Mexico. You didn't even know the event happened in 1947. Yeah. So there is a need for public education for sure. It's kind of sad how ignorant they actually are on things they're putting out there. So let's school them as much as we can.
I just realized how crazy the number 47 has become for me in my life. All those UFO events happened in 1947. Roswell and Kenneth Arnold's Mount Rainier sighting. I work for a company with 47 in the title. I live at an apartment that includes the number 47. The building, not my apartment number. And so many other things. It just... If we're on the 47th degree parallel here in Seattle, it's always 47 degrees every time I check the weather report. But
there's 47 books on your bookshelf too. I can't
probably. Well, there's a different bookshelf with all the goodies on it, the fun books, the UFO books. But anyways, this show has the premise that it sounds like a lot of these fictional UFO shows have, that are meant to be on a more casual basis. Is this supposed to be a comedy, or is this?
Yes.
Yes, it is, right? Yeah. What was the one that came out a year or two ago? Is it UFO People? What was it called? Ryan, I know you were a big fan of it.
People of Earth?
What was that called?
People of Earth. So that was essentially TNT. The same thing. It was an alien family trying to hide in suburbs, right?
There were, it was about abductees, like a support group of abductees.
Oh, that's right. Okay, what am I thinking?
Yes. There were aliens in the town and stuff.
Yeah,
you're
okay.
Right.
There was a comedy sitcom that came out within the last couple of years that was an alien family pretending to be human in a small town.
Oh,
I don't remember.
Well, I mean, that is the premise of
You're not thinking
the
of
Roswell, New Mexico show.
Yeah, Roswell, New Mexico. That was actually pretty good.
Roswell,
It lasted
come on,
like
guys.
3 seasons.
Yeah. No, this was like a
That was like a 20-something. That was CW.
Yeah, this was a one and
20-somethings.
done like NBC or something. It got canceled
gotcha.
before it even started airing, I think. But yeah, a lot of that material.
eventually
Hopefully
get
they'll
canceled.
make it good.
Hey, Alan
Yeah.
Tudyk is awesome, so I'm
Yeah,
excited
totally.
to see
Yeah.
how he handles
very cool.
this material. Yeah,
What network is this on?
Sci-fi.
sci-fi,
Sci-fi,
which I didn't
yeah.
know they were still making like original shows anymore. I
That's
haven't
mostly
heard,
what they
like-
do. They are the kings of original content.
Oh,
Yeah,
you're gonna
like
get
the
into like shark
Sharknado.
versus
Sharknado. Yeah.
shark versus octopus, and
Yes,
Yeah,
all of
yeah,
those.
yeah.
All of those. I love when they do the marathons.
They'll probably have
of
a
those. It's awful.
digital channel.
Yeah.
I think this one's based on a graphic novel. Am I correct in that?
I believe that is
Yeah.
correct. Yeah.
That's cool. I always like to see those adaptations. So, yeah, it looks good. The what do you call it? The practical effects they have on Tudyk's like Alien is really good. I thought they did a fantastic job. It's almost got like a vaporwave feel to like his reptilian skin and whatnot. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm gonna check it out for sure.
so is it actually premiering tonight, or has it already aired? Because I'm
could very well be
seeing
premiering tonight.
on TV soon, and then
we're
it says, "Oh wait, that's episode 4." Sorry, episode 1. So it's already played 4 episodes. It looks like.
Okay.
What?
Oh wow.
Well, I have
No,
not caught
I
any
thought it
of
was coming out like on the 28th or something.
Okay,
I'm
well,
really
I'm looking at a
confused on
very
that one.
confusing time chart here, where some is saying that it premieres on the 27th, episode 1, season 1.
Yeah, that's
but then
what I
it
heard.
shows tonight at 11:35 p.m. on Sci-Fi, season 1, episode 4. I'm confused.
It says on Sci-Fi's website
Pilot,
the season
yeah.
premiere is January 27th.
All right, so it premieres this Wednesday, and we can all tune in. I'm going to send this to you guys on our Facebook chat because I'm not crazy.
Sweet. No, I believe it.
We know you're not crazy. Well, I get excited about, fiction and nonfiction shows alike. The nonfiction shows certainly are more exciting, but, you got to have fun too. And I love what people are doing with the fictional stuff these days. So check that out too. But yeah, I think that's it, guys. I think we mumbled and BS'd our way through this episode without getting drunk, which is always good for a happy hour show.
It was a very sober happy hour. Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
sober happy.
Yeah. Well,
I was drinking
guys.
apple cider.
You can put things in apple cider, I'll tell you.
I did not.
Yes, you did.
I'm doing dry January, so
All right, good for you.
I'm a teetotaler at the moment.
Well, citizens, that's going to do it for this episode. You can find more episodes of Unknown on all the major podcast platforms, and you can always find the show and our other shows at rogueplanet.tv, because Unknown is a Rogue Planet production. Rogueplanet.tv is your home for all the strange. Thanks again for hanging out with us today. I'm Jason McClellan.
I'm Maureen Ellsbury.
I'm Ryan Sprague.
and I'm Shane Hurd.
Do us a favor, friends. Always treat the UFO subject with the cautious and responsible skepticism it deserves. Question everything. Have the courage to form your own opinions. Keep truth as the focus of your quest, even if the truth conflicts with your opinions. And, of course, stay strange.